So Nick always reminds me that I need to pause before introducing speakers, because otherwise he finds it hard to edit the video recordings. So here's the pause. And I'd like to welcome Stuart Melvin from the Grassroots Development Team at Friends of the Earth, who is going to take us through a couple of sessions. Stuart, welcome to the district-wide CAN Forum in Stroud. Very pleased that you could make it. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fred, and thanks, Nick, for your technical help tonight, and thanks everyone for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here, to meet you all, and to speak and hopefully give you a hand with some of these points. But first thing I'll say is that there's no perfect answers to any of this, so let's have a discussion and let's see where we get to with it. But we're always on hand to try and help and to try and figure things out with FOE affiliates as well. I will share my screen. Just make sure that I've got the right screen open before I do that, and take you through a couple of slides. And as Fred says, we're going to split it into two sections tonight. The first one talking about community engagement and mapping, and the second then on, I suppose, broadly speaking, recruitment and retention, getting people involved and keeping them involved. We will, partway through that, break into some breakout groups to have a discussion about it. And when we do that, I will share a link for a Google Doc where you can take some notes, and I'll explain how to do that, how that will work when we get there. But let's get into it. So we're going to talk about involving people. I want to just ask you a question to start off, and I'm hoping some of you will be able to type in the chat box to see what's going on at the moment. So I'm interested to know, all of you and your CANs around the Stroud area, how do you typically get people involved in your groups or your projects at the moment? So any answers in the chat box would be really helpful, and it'd be interesting to reflect back on those towards the end of the session. In personal contact and chat, thank you, that's really helpful. Any others, please do throw them in there. Word of mouth. Where does this personal contact and word of mouth tend to happen? Is this kind of friends to friends, or is this on the street, or what type of scenario is that happening in? Facebook, interesting, thanks. Friends from Paul, excellent. It's good to know. Okay, keep those coming. Any other thoughts on that? And we'll come back to them at the end. Tabling at events such as flower shows, yeah. List of supporters' emails through local newsletter, excellent. Good, okay, good. Other social groups, brilliant. Phone round as well, brilliant. It's good to, you guys are doing some really great things already, so that's really good to know. But some of this will touch into going into some of the nuances of why it may or may not work so well, and what we can do to improve it. So my second question then for all of you for the chat box is, what's the best thing about being involved? Why are you involved? And I don't just mean in terms of, I know why you're involved in terms of the environmental cause and the climate issue and all the rest of it. But in terms of your enjoyment, in terms of your satisfaction, your motivation, what for you is the best thing about being involved in the group? And again, I'll give you a couple of minutes for that. Not facing the issue on my own, yeah. What a really great answer. Standing with other people, being part of a community, yeah. The others, the company, the support strengthens me, yeah. Meeting new people, yeah. Okay. Again, keep those coming. Makes a global issue relevant to a local context. Great answer, excellent. Okay. I'm saying great answer in the sense that these are just really interesting to me. Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just whatever makes you tick, but it's good to know. And we're going to reflect on that a little bit again as we go forward. So yeah, any others? Keep them coming. Okay, right. We'll jump into the main topic. Thank you for indulging me in that. Obviously, why are we talking about this? So we're going to talk about people and how to get people involved, because ultimately it's people that give us our power. Now, FOE, as you know, is largely a campaigning organisation, but we also do a lot of project work. There are different types of power. There's the kind of power over scenario where, typically we're up against a powerful figure, a politician or corporation, and we're trying to exercise collective power to change their mind. And there's also the power with scenario where we're working with other people or with the council or with a business or anything else to implement a project. But either way, it's having people involved that gives us that power to create change. So The reason why we've circled it is that obviously when we're thinking about getting people involved, it's where we need to start. We don't start by thinking about the change. We're not here thinking about the issue, the cause, even the campaign or the project goal. We need to start from that mindset of thinking about people and thinking about why they might like to be involved, why they might like to stay involved. And this is obviously why I've asked you this question a moment ago in terms of what's the best thing for you personally. But obviously the first thing we need to do is to think about who are our people, who are we trying to get involved? And these are just 3 tools that we use interrelatedly to analyze our community and to think about who and how we want to get involved. What I will say is that we are currently running an 8-week course, which covers a lot of this in a lot of detail. It's obviously already running, so it's too late to jump on that, but we will be running it again in a couple of months, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail and go through each of these tools and each of these exercises, as well as a lot of others. So I'm only going to skim over them tonight, but I hope it gives you a little bit of thought about it. Again, some of you may well have done all these before, some of you won't have. So first one here is community mapping, and literally, as you can see from the picture here, we normally start by doing a scribbled diagram of our community. That might be it could be a village level or even a neighborhood level, right up to a city or geo-region. But what we're looking to mark on there is everything of interest in terms of the population of that community. So we might start off with physical things such as, roads, rivers, as I say, neighborhoods. We might start to narrow down into sites of particular interest, so council buildings, schools, hospitals, bus station, all of the places where people meet, congregate, or where public life is administered, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. And then we start to think about the demographics, and we start to think about, the age of people in different areas, the ethnicities, the financial backgrounds, inequalities, etc. All the information that we can gather. And again, it's one of those things where you've almost never got enough information. The more the better, and you can keep adding to it as your campaign and your project grows. But what it begins to do, hopefully, usually, is to identify the gaps, identify either potential rich seams of people to engage in our organization, or indeed, as I say, gaps, spaces where we're not well representative, where there are large sections of the population that people from that section are not that involved in our group or not that involved in our campaign or our project, etc. So it's beginning to identify those things. The second thing that we do, and I should say, actually, do pop any questions as we go in the chat box, and I'll try and answer them during the call, and if I can't, I'll come back to them another time and email you some answers for Fred to distribute and stuff, but I'll move along. So the second one is network mapping. This is literally, somebody mentioned recruiting from friends. What we do here is to do this, the same thing, but in a slightly more systematic way, because it often opens up avenues of thought that we might not have otherwise by just putting it down on paper. So we normally put ourselves at the center of a spider diagram, put your own name in there, list out all of the places where you interact with people. This can be your closest friends, it can be your family, but then it might also be your workmates, it might also be, your church or your social club or your pub, your cafe, as I said, your bus station, or anywhere else where you tend to interact with people. And then start to list off spiders' webs from there, beginning to list their names, but then thinking about where they each interact with people. So it moves on from that first level of where do you interact with people and who are those people, to then thinking about where do they each interact with people. And I'll give you a little example here from me personally. Of course, one of the first people I would put on my map would be my wife. But my wife works in a school, so she immediately interacts with several hundred people, both teachers, support staff, parents, and so on and so forth. And again, when we then sort of consider that in relation to the community map we've done in the first place, we start to see that quite often we have, that kind of, there's only 6 degrees of separation type of thing, where between one of our friends and another, we often have roots into a section of the community that we might not realize we do in the first place. Typically that, again, opens up spaces of that to systematize, I suppose, the word of mouth recruitment that you mentioned at the beginning, some of you. The third thing that we do is we actually actually chart the progress. So again, this is about going about it in quite a systematic way. So we will have a table, spreadsheet, either individually or shared between us in the group. Obviously, if you're sharing it between you in the group, if you want help with this, talk to us about it. We need to think about data protection and making sure that you're staying legally compliant and all the rest of it. But more or less, the idea here is to list down the names of the people that we want to speak to, their contact details, and then we'll ascribe some kind of value. So here I've put a support level, and I've said, Jane has a support level of 5, John has a support level of 2, etc. And what we would do in that case is we might say to ourselves, well, we want to ask these people to help us, I don't know, sign a petition, say, or something like that, some task that we can ask them to be involved with. And then, the people that are really, really engaged in that and go and get 25 petition sheets signed in, or a 5, or a 1, whichever way you do it. And the people who say no and don't agree with the subject and all the rest of it, they're right down the bottom. It's everybody really in the middle that we're interested in. We're interested in moving people further up that support level charting, basically. So it's about thinking more about what we can ask them to do and ask people to take on more, and so on and so forth. And we'll come on to that a little bit more later on. So those are 3 of the quick tools that we use to think about who are our people. I'll move along for time reasons, but as I say, I'll come back to questions and things in the chat box at the end of each section. If I can't answer them, we'll do that by email. So having hopefully, gone through some of these tools, and again, I'll get Fred to email out some of these so you can do them for real with your group and stuff like this. We might end up with a list of people that we want to engage with. We might have a list of people from our personal network map, or we might say to ourselves, well, actually, there is a gap there. I don't know anybody in the Bengali community in my town, so I need to then map out local institutions where Bengali people are likely to be well represented, and start to think about those and start to find out who the people are to speak to. But either way, we end up with a list of people that we need to speak to. But I said at the beginning that we need to come at this from a people-centered kind of way of thinking about it. So it's less about our cause and our issue and more about them as people and us as people. So we start to think, what do they care about? Now, first thing, obviously, we all know this, but it's helpful to remind ourselves sometimes when we're doing this work that we're all different. We all have things where we all have our own sense of purpose, or that maybe in our organizations even, they're part of an organization that has a different purpose to your organization. We all have our own religion or identity or economic background or ideology, lots of other things I could have added to this list as well. I'm sure you can come up with them yourselves. So we need to think about, okay, what is it a different person is motivated by, and how can we pitch what we're doing in a way that is meaningful to them and matters to them? But of course, there's also ways in which we're all the same, or the vast majority of us anyway. The vast majority of people would put our family at the top of most lists in terms of our priorities. I've used the phrase human needs here. I mean, there are a great many that we could debate from a philosophical perspective or psychological perspective about what we need. But, several of you mentioned meeting new people. You mentioned not feeling alone. You mentioned, having that support from other people around you. So those kind of relationships ultimately are a real need for people. And then our values, even where there's been some interesting research recently looking at polarization and seeing that, when we ask people if they're right wing or left wing, people are quite polarized and they'll answer one way or the other. But when we ask specific issues, and we do so in a way that centers human needs, actually most people share many of the same values. Most people would say that they're in favor of fairness. Most people would say they're in favor of people having opportunities and people having, a well-rounded life and all of these kinds of things. So we can figure out ways in which we're all different, but we're all the same. And ultimately what we want to do when we're having conversations with people is to listen, to really listen to people and figure out how we can relate both the similarities that we have, but also the differences that we have to the thing that we're asking and to the thing that we're doing. And the way to do that is to ask open questions. Again, some of you will have heard this phrase, some of you won't. If anyone can tell me what's an open question as opposed to a closed question, it'd be interesting to see if there's anything in the chat box on that. While we do that, to see if anyone can answer that, I'll just address a couple of the questions. So I might have already answered it, but if not, Simon, you've asked what does support level mean? This is up to you. So this is something for you to codify. It's just a way of tracking where people are on your scale of how supportive they are for you, your campaign, your project, your group. as I say, for me, typically, I would say that I personally, when I'm doing my job, I use a chart where a number 1 is an activist and a number 5 is completely opposed to the campaign that I'm running or the campaign I'm involved with. And everyone in the middle, you know, somebody could be a member but not very active. They could then be, you know, supportive but not a member yet, so on and so forth. Key is to get people. Richard says, "Who aren't my people?" Yeah, this is a really good question as well. And how you involve, how you think about who to prioritize and who to exclude. Again, comes down to your group's strategic needs. Again, there's not an always present right or wrong answer, but it comes down to what your group needs at the time and what sort of campaign or project you're running. But in terms of the answers to the open questions, absolutely, it's not a yes or no answer. So it's any question that gets somebody talking, basically, stops them being able to just say yes or just say no. So we wouldn't ask, you know, do you care about climate change? Because people could say, yeah, and then they could walk on past you in the street and carry on, you know, or no, and then carry on past you. Equally, so we're going to ask something about, you know, I don't know, how long have you lived in Stroud? And somebody's going to spend a little bit longer answering that question and give you time to ask another question and so on and so forth and begin to get to know somebody. So asking open questions is really, really important. So we've mapped out who people are, how we might think about their motivations and their cares, their concerns, etc. We're going to break into the first of our breakout groups, and it would be interesting to see what you all think. Obviously, if there's any more quick questions, actually, yeah, I'll take that one first before we go into breakouts. So Paul's mentioned, do we need to worry about data protection legislation with the charting progress tool? The short answer is yes, basically you do. Now that doesn't, you know, stop you doing it or stop you doing anything, but there are data protection concerns that you need to take into account when you're doing work like this. I can't go into detail now because it would take too long, but again, we absolutely can help you and your groups with data protection. So if people want us to send through some resources on that, I'll give those to Fred to pass on. Likewise, if anyone wants to get in touch with Fo to ask about that for your group, then again, we can help you with that. But obviously, the main thing is that we should only have personal data where it's been given to us in a freely consenting way. We should only be sharing it on a need basis with other typically, you know, in many organizations, it would be with other staff. Of course, in a local voluntary organization, it is okay to share that data with volunteers, so long as, again, you have data protection policies in place and you show how you're protecting it and so on and so forth. But again, any concerns with that, do get in touch with us and we can help with that. So we're going to go into some breakouts now. I'm actually going to, I'll leave the slide up there so that you can see what the question is. But what I am going to do is pop a Google Doc in the chat box for you to use. Actually, no, I'll tell you what, I will stop the screen share because it will help to get the breakout group set up. So I'm going to pop the Google Doc in the chat box. So some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not be. A Google Doc is very much like a Word document, a Microsoft Word document, except that multiple people can work on it at the same time. And it's where we're going to take our notes tonight. So I will just set the breakups.
I just say first, Stuart, that the video should be working now. If you want to put their video on, it will make it a bit easier to chat in the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Nick. That's really helpful. Yeah, it's lovely to see some faces. Good to see you all. Okay, I've got those set up. So in terms of the Google Doc, you don't all need to open it, but if you do want to open it and have a look now, please do. There are basically a few group sections on that Google Doc, group 1, group 2, group 3, etc. And in there is a table with the question that we're asking, and then an open space for you to answer the question with any notes from your group discussion. Obviously, I say obvious, it might not be obvious. There are 2 questions on there. At the moment, we're only dealing with the first one. We'll come on to the second one later, so don't worry about that. We're only dealing with the first question, which is, you know, basically who are the people we should be speaking to and where can we find them? You should be able to write on that document. You only need one person in each group to do that, of course. So agree amongst each other who that will be. And for those people, I would say you don't need verbatim minutes. This isn't a formal meeting like that, but just take some key points, some key ideas of what people are coming up with. You don't need to save it or anything like that. It's automatically saved. So all you need to do is find an empty table that isn't being used by a different group and take your notes in it. Hopefully that should be relatively obvious once you get into the document how that works. But again, if it isn't, you can submit a question through the breakout rooms to ask the host for help, which I assume will come to me and to Fred and to Nick. So hopefully we can help you with that. So are there any questions at this point? If not, I'll open the breakouts. Just while people pop any questions you have in the chat box, for anyone who hasn't used breakout rooms before, I'm going to create these breakout rooms. They are basically mini versions of this meeting. So you'll go into a room with 4 or 5 other people. It's random, so I don't know who you're going to be with. So either brilliant or sorry, depending. But hopefully you have a good conversation. It will pop up on your screen to invite you to join a breakout. But if you don't see that, just draw my attention to it and I'll add you in manually. So I'm going to create those now. There's no questions in the chat box, so I'm going to go ahead and create those groups. So yeah, hopefully you have a good conversation. Who are the people we should be speaking to and where are we going to find them? Let's have a talk about that. Cheers. I will start sharing my screen again and move us on to the next topic. So that first topic, if we're thinking about how to identify the people that we need to be engaging and where to find them, this next topic is going to be about how we then go about the process of getting them involved and ultimately how we keep them involved as well. So we're going to move into that. Before this kind of bridges the gap. So we're going to talk briefly about a persuasive conversation model here. And there's a few models of this, different ways of doing it. And again, none of it's rocket science, but sometimes it's just really helpful to step back and have a think about what we're doing, what we're saying, and those little nuances that might make a conversation more or less effective about getting somebody involved. So I'm just going to run you through these, but again, we can provide not exactly a script, but a kind of bullet point things to think about when you're having these kind of conversations to get people involved in your organization. So there's a 5-step process to it. In the model we use, we start by introducing. Obviously, you would introduce yourselves at the beginning of a conversation, but what we mean by this isn't just to introduce ourselves. Of course, we might be talking to a friend who already knows us, but what we're talking about is introducing the conversation, making it an intentional space where everyone understands what we're there for. So it's about being honest and upfront with people that you are looking to talk to them about the group, the project, the campaign, whatever it is, and having that upfront and honest in the first place so that people know why we're having this conversation. But number 2 should be the biggest part of this conversation, and it comes back to what we said a minute ago: asking open questions, exploring a person's motivations, thinking about and learning about, listening to the things that make them tick. So the things that might be very different to you, whether that's, again, their religion, their ideology, their background, etc., etc. And the things that are really similar, whether you share values, whether you both have kids, or you both, like football. I don't know, it could be anything. But it's about really finding out those points of divergence and those points of convergence, commonality between you, in order to then relate to that person when we're talking about the project or the campaign that we're engaged in. So number 3 is to then move into that relate. So this is where we're talking about the issue, the campaign, the project, etc. But we're doing it in such a way that we're relating it to that person, thinking about, again, their motivations, their concerns. If first and foremost they're an animal lover and there's an angle to it that's animal based, then don't focus on the family or the children, focus on the animals, and so on and so forth. Turn it around to be speaking to a person's concerns and motivations. Number 4, and sometimes this is the bit that's actually hardest. We probably do 1, 2, and 3 on a daily basis when we're having conversations with, pre-COVID anyway, when we're having conversations with new people. It's just about making sure that we're doing it in that codified way. But number 4 is to make an ask. And this is really where we switch round from the open question to the closed question. And sometimes you might hear organizers in Friends of the Earth, by the way, somebody pointed out to me earlier that some of you won't know what FO is. FO is Friends of the Earth. I'm sorry we slip into that abbreviation. It's a horrible abbreviation for us, but anyway, Friends of the Earth. That's who I work for. We would want to make what's called a hard ask. So this is an ask that is in no way abstract, is in no way easy for somebody to kind of blithely say yes to and then not follow up on, and so on and so forth. It's something quite specific. So to give you an example, instead of saying, do you want to get involved with our campaign? I would say, there's a meeting next Wednesday at Sarah's house. Do you want to come with me, basically? Or instead of saying, can you say that you support our campaign? Again, I might say, look, we've got this petition. We really need to get as many signatures as possible. Could you take a sheet and get 10 signatures for me, and I'll collect it next week? Something like that. So something that's quite hard, quite specific. It's a yes or no answer, really. And we make that ask. And obviously, again, it might be based on the fact that we need that, our organization wants that thing to happen, but we might also tailor it slightly. So, if it was if I was thinking earlier, I mentioned that I might ask my wife to speak to teachers or parents at the school, then I might tailor an ask that was tailored to the parents of young people or something like that. So it might try and again make it relevant to that person and to their life, their organization, or whatever. Number 5 is not part of the conversation itself, but it's just a reminder to always do the follow-up. Typically, again, this is something that I would agree with the person. So I would say there and then, is it okay if I give you a text in a couple of days or in a week? How long would it take you to get those 10 signatures? About a week? Great. Do you mind if I give you a text in a week's time? See if you've managed it and if I can come pick it up and stuff like that. And then I keep that promise, So again, it's not about bothering and badgering people. We'll talk in a minute about keeping people involved. Ultimately, people that we've had to push and badger to get involved are not going to stay involved. So that's not the purpose here. It's just a thing about giving people a reminder, continuing that relationship and building upon it by continuing to converse and continuing to engage with that person. So that's the model of conversation that we use to get people involved in the first place, or get them to take a first step, or even just to find out more about them or the wider community or something like that as well. So I'll jump on from there, but any questions, ideas, etc., pop them in the chat box, and I'll keep looking at those as we go. So, okay, so we've listed out a bunch of people that we might want to engage with, either people we know, community leaders, etc. We've thought about their motivations, their concerns. We've put that all on our chart. We've then, found a way to have a meeting with them, whether it's, sometimes it'll be random, of course, on the stall, on the street, or something like that. Sometimes it's more intentional. We might arrange to meet the vicar from the church, or so on and so forth. And we're having this kind of conversation. We're going to move on to thinking about then, why do people get involved and why do they stay involved? Now, I asked you folks at the beginning, how you're getting people involved at the moment, and what are the best things about being involved for you personally. I'm just going to read this word for word, but you can see it on the screen. And I should say that we're not particularly interested in the issue, the cause that this movement is working on, but we are interested here in what this sociologist is finding out. So the sociologist Ziad Munson has found that almost half of the activists on the front lines of the anti-abortion movement, those who protest outside abortion clinics, were not anti-abortion when they attended their first event. I don't know about you, but I found that surprising to find that half of the people that are taking, quite aggressive direct action in that movement were not even aligned with that movement in their own minds when they first got involved. They attended because a friend asked them. That goes back to something that some of you said earlier. They had just joined a new church, presumably the church was involved in that movement, or they were retired and had more free time. They stayed, however, because at these events, they found things we all want: friends, responsibility, and a sense that what they are doing matters. By finding fellowship and responsibility, these people change not only their views on abortion, but also their commitment to act in general. So again, personally, we might agree, disagree on the issue. I personally have no truck with this movement at all. They're not my friends. But it's interesting to note, I think, this thing about why people, when sociologists are looking into it, why are people getting involved with actions and events and also why are they staying involved? And it's really interesting. I think that chimes in with several of the things that you guys said at the beginning in terms of what are the best things for you about being involved with your group, the friends, the people you've met, the support you get, you know, those kinds of things of things that you mentioned and things that turn up here. So we're going to delve into that in a bit more detail on how to structure your group, your project in such a way as to reflect that and to, you know, make it more likely that happens, that process happens. So the first of those things is about relationships. So this is about intentionally building relationships in your groups through your organizing, through your projects and campaigns. And of course, you're already doing this. You know, I mean, you've all mentioned it at the beginning. You've all said, you know, we like being with these kind of people and meeting new people and so on and so forth. But there are ways that you can both make it more likely and also, I suppose, make it scalable so that more and more people can partake and can still benefit from those kind of relationships that you often build automatically in small groups, but sometimes less so in big groups. So the first one here is, and we could add more to this. So first thing I'll say is please do add more in the chat box. What other things could we do? I've put some on the screen here, but have a welcome process. Okay, so have a formal process that welcomes new people into the group, gets them to meet other people, helps explain anything about the group that, you know, might seem a bit odd at first or a bit unusual or a bit difficult to understand or anything like that. Have that welcome process. Move into an orientation process. The orientation is a little bit less about welcome in the sense of just being friendly and more about helping somebody to understand the purpose of the group, the strategy, the activities that you're up to, any, you know, kind of norms and protocols or guidelines or, you know, just ways that we do things that are specific to the group. Because again, people find it really hard to build relationships if they're spending their whole time worried that they are saying the wrong thing, you know, putting a foot wrong, stepping outside of your norms or finding your norms a bit strange for them or anything like that. So again, thinking as much as possible about the different people that we're trying to get involved and orientating them to why the group works the way it does. Obviously then socializing. So, you know, that's been real difficult over the last 2 years, of course. You know, we've all done a lot of Zoom quizzes, I imagine, but finding intentional ways to build socializing into your group, into your activities. Again, I'm sure you do a lot of this already, but it's worth thinking about. So socializing, well, you know, some of the best moments, I guess, I've been involved with as an activist and organizer is often like the week before a big, I don't know, protest march or something like that. The march itself is a thing, but actually the pizza night where everyone comes together and makes banners and makes placards is really the space where real organizing gets done. And a lot of people, you know, meet each other for the first time, share, you know, stories of why they're there and why they care and why it matters to them, and it bonds people together, builds organization over the longer term. Buddy system. So I don't necessarily mean like just formally saying we've got an existing member who will support a new member, although that can be really helpful. But even just making sure that when you give out a task, give it to 2 people, give it to somebody old or somebody new. I don't mean old in age, by the way. I mean old as in been in the group for a long time. You know, and have them work together on it, because there's nothing to build relationships like doing some work together and having something practical to focus on when you're trying to get to know somebody. And then finally, check-ins. So actually the group checking in on each other. Again, having that somewhat formalized so that people in the group check in on newer members or check in on somebody who's taken a role on, taken a task on. And by check-in, you know, I don't quite mean in the way that a manager does a check-in with an employee, but I do mean an element of that, the more pastoral element of that, where they check in to see how that person's feeling. Was there any training or support they need? You know, some of it is formal and is about developing people and helping them increase their own kind of skills and capacity, which I'm going to move on to a little bit. So those are some of the things about helping to build relationships. The other things that were mentioned in that sociologist quote a minute ago was about competence. So this is about having people not only be able to do things in the group and to take on tasks and roles, but to feel like they are competent, to feel comfortable, to feel confident, to feel like they're doing things well and doing things in a way that's helping the cause, helping the group, so on and so forth. So it's not just about giving out tasks and roles, although that is a big part of it. So the first thing we've put on here is new tasks and roles. I would go through with your group all of the possible things that people could do, right? Be as open as possible and break it down, you know. So if the task is, again, I don't know, get 10 signatures on the petition, we could break that down and say, get 10 signatures from students, get 10 signatures from the local mosque, get 10 signatures from, you know, the local trade union or whatever it is, and give people a role that's specific to them. So we can break it down as much as possible. How many different things could people do in the group? And of course, it's often typically that we want to come from that from the angle of what does the group need? And it is important. We don't want to give things out that the group doesn't need, but we're really, again, coming back to the beginning, thinking about people and thinking about a person and what they need. So giving out tasks that will encourage people to you know, feel like they've contributed something. In terms of developing competencies, of course, we can go back to buddies, we can do more check-ins, but we can also do more formalized coaching. We can also do something like a study group. So even just having a reading group where they get together with 3 or 4 other members and have you know, do some reading and have a conversation about a particular thing, a particular area of the work. You know, it might be how to run effective meetings, or it might be how to, I don't know, how to do a tree planting day, or, you know, you name it. There's any number of things that people could learn together. But people who learn together, again, tend to build strong relationships, tend to stay involved because they feel like the group is nourishing them and developing them as people. The other thing here then is about feeling some autonomy, feeling like they've got responsibility and that they have some choice and control in the whole matter. And it's not just about being handed a task in that kind of robotic way. So we think here about actually giving people responsibility, you know, respecting people enough to think, well, they're probably capable of figuring, you know, we'll help them with the last bit. We'll do some study groups and we'll do some training and coaching, but also thinking, well, you can probably figure it out if we structure this in the right way. So one of the things here is about giving out whole tasks. So what I mean by that is not breaking a task down in such a way as to give everybody a little bit of it, but actually to help somebody to accomplish something where they see an outcome. They see that it makes a difference to the group. So, you know, running a meeting, it's really tempting to break out everything from, you know, promoting it, chairing it, booking the hall, and so on and so forth. But you can have 2 or 3 people work together and do that in a way where they all see the outcome of their labor and what they've contributed. Giving people some choice and control over the way that they go about it, you know, so not having everything kind of tightly defined and predefined, but scaffolding as well. So what I mean by scaffolding, in the same way that you put scaffolding up around a building as you're building it, what we mean by this is for somebody to feel free and to feel like they've got choice and control, they also have to know what the limits of that are. It's quite hard to feel free if you're worried about hitting the limits and annoying people or upsetting someone, right? So if we can scaffold that, if we can set out a framework where we say, well, we want to achieve X, Y, and Z, but the way you go about that is up to you, then we can scaffold them, give them the freedom to then do that. And it lets people feel a sense of autonomy in what they do. The final thing I'll just mention this is you can make a difference. So this is what YCMAD stands for. It's letting people know that, or literally communicating, convincing people that the thing they're doing, the task, the role, the way that they're getting involved is genuinely making a difference. Partly you can do that through, as I say, giving out whole tasks where they see outcomes, but it's also about the way we talk about our issues and the way we talk about the problems we're acting on. So quite often, of course, in our groups, we will talk about, well, you know, in Friends of the Earth groups and in transition groups, I imagine, we might talk about environmental issues. And we spend, yeah, let's be honest, we probably spend a fair amount of time complaining. We probably spend a lot of time, you know, putting the world to rights and saying what's wrong with the world. But for a lot of people, obviously, there's a degree to which that's really useful because they get to explore an issue with us. But too much of it can be a problem, right? It can end up quite off-putting or exclusive. Most people don't want to complain all the time. So one of the things we're doing is focusing on what our plans are, not just what the problems are. So what is it that a transition Stroud group, one of the CANs in the area, is doing to address the issue that we're all angry about or upset about? It's going as much into the how as the why. So, You know, why is climate change terrible? Well, yeah, okay. How are we going to solve it? What is it about our work, our strategy, our campaign, our project, our group that is having some impact on that issue? And ultimately, what's the vision? What's the vision for a better world? What does the world look like when we've solved that problem, or when we've had an impact on it at least, giving people some positive thing to aim for? We're going to go back into our breakouts for about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes tops, if Fred lets me get away with it. And we're going to have a conversation about what we could do different based on some of the things we've just been talking about. It could be the persuasive conversations. It could be, you know, how we give our tasks, or what we ask people to do. It could be more about the pastoral, how we support people, etc., etc. I'll just give you one example before we go into that. I had a conversation recently with an activist who is involved with a Friends of the Earth group, campaigning group, but also with a repair shop, where volunteers come together and they repair things for people in the community. And the volunteering at the repair shop was 1,000 times higher than volunteering is with the Friends of the Earth group. And we were reflecting on why that might be. And really it's because the repair shop hits all of the things we've just talked about. People feel competent because they already come with a skill. They feel safe and build relationships because they all go for a drink afterwards, but also they know what their skill is, they know what they're there to offer, and they can see their outcomes. They can see that they're having impacts because they literally fix a thing for a person, and that person walks away with their product fixed. So there's something in that really helps them to involve a lot more volunteers. But yeah, let's go back into our breakouts, as I say, for about 10 to 15 minutes, have another conversation here about what we could do different, not just to get people involved, but to keep them involved. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. The link for the Google Doc, you might probably all still have it open, but I'll just put it in the chat box again in case you need it again. And it's the second question in your tables. I'm going to put you back into the same groups that you were in a minute ago, because it will just help keep that conversation flowing. So I'm going to open those now, and it'll be about 10 to 15 minutes. Thanks.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you found those discussions fruitful and thought-provoking, even if rather brief. And as a big special thanks to Stuart, who's put a lot of thought into how to structure and deliver the meeting. And I'm very grateful for your contribution. And if there's meeting follow-up, no doubt we'll be in touch, because I think some of the concepts that you were explaining are very useful to get our heads around. So that would be great if we could perhaps do some follow-up. So Stuart, you're most welcome to stay with us, but I know you have a young family, so if you want to escape, please feel free to be able to do that. Okay, so we're on to that stage of the meeting where we're into news and updates. And in the spirit of what Stuart was saying about how to involve and engage people, most of these updates are on plans about how we go about reducing carbon. So hopefully will be interesting to folk. Please do use the hands up icon under reactions if you have questions as we go through the updates. The first set of updates is on rooftop solar, where there are 4 specific things to mention. The first of which is that I hope that everybody here is aware of the community share offer that Gloucestershire Community Energy Cooperative are currently running to enable them to install PVs on Minchinhampton School roof. It has a target of £70,000 and is well over halfway there, but the clock is now ticking on the end of the share offer, which is at the end of the month. If you've been thinking about investing, now is the time to do so, as the offer closes very shortly. Nick, are you able to put the link to the share offer in chat so that people can click on it?
Yes, I have done.
That's great. Thank you very much, Nick. So that was the first one. The second one was about the Big Solar Co-op. Those of you who were at the October 2020 forum meeting may recall the conversation with Big Solar Co-op. Big Solar Co-op is a national social enterprise which has been established to achieve benefits of scale and bring more non-domestic rooftops into business case viability for community-owned installs. We've been in conversation with them for quite a while now, and we're very pleased to say that the Big Solar Co-op has made an offer of match funding towards employing a project coordinator to focus on local installs in the Stonehouse to Stroud town area and neighbouring parishes. So it is a focused subset of the district. We're currently trying to raise £8,000 to match fund the Big Solar Co-op offer. And we have our first contribution decided by Rodborough Parish Council, which met last week and has decided to contribute £500 towards the total that we require. Cairns Cross Town Council is meeting tonight, and Stonehouse and Stroud Town Council shortly, and we're also talking to the district. I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to do the match fund, in which case we'll move forward with appointing a project coordinator who will actually be employed by Big Solar Co-op, but with an exclusive focus on our local area. The role of the project coordinator will be to identify potential buildings, engage the building owners and managers, take them through the process steps and get them signed up. And hopefully it will lead to a real step change in community-owned rooftop PV installs on community, public and local business buildings. So hopefully that's a project that we can really get to grips with. And obviously I'll be making sure that people are up to speed with developments as they happen. So that's the second PV project I wanted to mention. The third one is about domestic. Oh, I'll just let Richard Dean into the meeting because he's going to speak in a second about bulk domestic schemes. The third thing I wanted to mention was you may recall that the district council was hoping to collaborate with a national online platform to run a local Solar Together campaign to offer discounted PV installs to local homeowners. Unfortunately, that is now not happening. So Transition Stroud is resurrecting its plans for a local scheme in discussion with local installers. If those discussions go well, we'll be looking to collaborate with a local CAN to run a pilot. And the idea of the scheme is to offer concentrated domestic installs across a community, which will achieve a discounted price for the installs, to build in energy efficiency advice in the process to homeowners who are interested, to provide access to low interest owns for those who are less able to pay, and to build a community fund through contributions from the installers for every install that they get to do through the scheme. So we'll contact groups in a month or so to see who might be interested. I hope very much that current discussions which we just initiated with installers will deliver us a scheme. So I'll pause there and let Richard Dean come in, who has a scheme, perhaps a slightly less formal scheme than the one that we'll be proposing, but it's up and running. So Richard, do you want to spend a few minutes just briefing people on the scheme that you've got going?
Yeah, sorry about the intermission. I had to take a call. Yes, so I had panels put on to a house I moved into in Chalford, and it occurred to me that maybe I could just talk to the people that provided my panels and just have a little chat about whether they'd be interested in a kind of bulk installation kind of thing, and they were really enthusiastic about it and had quite a large capacity, I must say. So this is an organisation which does hundreds of council houses at a time all over England, and Birmingham in north of England, all in London and several other places. So they certainly had the capacity, and I found them very, very, very reasonable, and in terms of price, and incredibly quick in terms of the time it took to actually from surveys to installation. And eventually I got to, just through word of mouth, really, just spreading the word through the local Chalcan here, and anybody I could, you just think of like who's on your social list, who could you talk to, just to sort of broach the idea of like, is this something you've thought about? If this is an opportunity possibly to finally go through with it, with the understanding that there will be some kind of discount available. And I got about 35 people in Chalford alone signed up for it. I got numerous people from Ewley, from Wootton, from Stroud, from Cirencester, all over the place. And there's about about 50 people in total. I'm a GP, so I work in general practice all over the place. I got it put into the Gloucestershire Health Authority newsletter and got a very positive reply back from about another 30 plus GP practices. So these are all commercial installations who are all, and many of whom have got funds laid aside for the development of sustainable projects. And this, you know, I found that if you present a project, something ready-made to people, they will latch on the opportunity to use this money, which they've often kind of got already organized, and it's been very successful. And you know, there are countless surveys have already been done. There's about 20-30 surveys have already been done. We're doing about 10 surveys a week, and it's ongoing. So if anybody here is listening to this wants to jump on board, then please do contact me, because I think it is one of those things that the more people get on board with it, the better. But I found it, you know, quite an easy thing to do in terms of, I mean, I've been trying to not getting too involved in the sort of sticky end of this. My role, I've seen, is just to coordinate it locally. But I think, you know, that I found that this, you know, with the rising gas prices, electricity prices, and also the falling cost of panels and installations and batteries, and these are all, the company I used was installing batteries as well, which just leads to a whole flexibility of installation. So you got some people who I've got signed up who already have panels and have always wanted batteries, and I think it's, you know, it's worth thinking about. And I think I've always wanted to support local industries, and I have, as part and parcel of this project, contacted several local providers, and have found, you know, a little bit of a sort of lackluster sort of response in terms of, and it's mostly in terms of capacity. So I've found that most of the local companies have got very limited capacity, although I think Fred has usefully got in touch with some commercial installers who are keen to adapt their modus operandi to the domestic centre, which could be very exciting. So that's it, really.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. So there's a choice there. There's an up and running scheme. If you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, you need a domestic install, talk to Richard. If you want to wait a while for a scheme which involves local installers, will be coming out hopefully after discussion with local installers and finalisation of a pilot to talk to CANS about whether they wish to collaborate in that scheme. I hope that's not all been a bit too confusing on the PV front, but there's a lot going on. The next thing I wanted to move to is the another outcome from the survey that took place before Christmas. The survey confirmed what I guess we already knew, which is that the Slack online discussion forum isn't being used. And so we have in mind replacing the Slack workspace with a CAN forum Facebook group to post news, to exchange information between CANs and between ourselves and CANs, to promote CAN events and initiatives to one another, and enable discussion between CANs. And we wanted to take soundings on whether or not you would support the end of the Slack forum and the setting up of a new Facebook group for the CAN forum and all member CANs and associated organizations. So we're going to run a poll, which shouldn't take too long to complete. And I'm going to launch the poll now. The first question there is it's all about replacing Slack with a Facebook group. First question is, if you don't use the forum's online Slack workspace, is this because? And you can put in more than one answer there. So if people would like to start voting on why it is that they don't use the Slack workspace, which is the online forum for discussion between CANs, we'd be very grateful. Someone didn't know it existed. There'll be others who weren't aware of that. Time is a factor as well. It may be that you don't like the Slack platform.
And nothing's appeared on my screen, Fred. I'm not sure about anyone else.
Well, people are voting.
Okay.
If you could put in chat if you're having trouble seeing the. Okay, so people are now getting on to the second question. We remind you what we intend to use the Facebook group for, and we're asking people whether you're more likely to use a Facebook group than Slack. And that's a single choice response. And the third question is about whether you agree that we should replace the Slack workspace with a Facebook group. So we're up at 15 responses. There are 24 of us in the room. 3 or 4 of us probably won't do that. So I'm just waiting for a few more people to vote. It looks as if there would be support for replacing the Slack workspace with a Facebook group. This would be a private but visible group, so we would ask everybody to join it. Once you've joined, you'll be able to do posts which enable you to communicate with all the other CANs. And so I think it would be a useful function. Okay, I'm assuming that everybody who wants to vote has had the opportunity to do so. So I'm going to end the poll there. Thank you very much for that. And we'll take account of the findings and have a think about whether to set it up and how quickly. Oh, quick look at the sharing of the results. Fairly even spread there on the first question. A majority think that they would be more likely to use the Facebook group. And those in favor of setting up a Facebook group is 11-1 with 5 don't knows. So thank you very much for that. Okay. We're nearly at the end of the meeting. We don't like to run much past 8:30. Thank you for bearing with us. The next update I have is from Stroud District Council, and it's about the Community Engagement Board, which they've established to support delivery of the 2030 carbon neutral strategy. And there's apologies from Georgia Spooner, who was at the last meeting, but who is the District Council's new Community Action Officer on the 2000 strategy, who was to have been here tonight, but unfortunately is unwell. So I've got the gist of the report back from her to report to you. The new board, the new engagement board, is now appointed after a formal recruitment process. 10 community representatives have been appointed. These 10 community representatives will work with the cross-party representation of elected members and the Youth Council. The recruitment panel had input from Richard Erskine from Nailsworth Can, so the council would like to thank Richard for his time and insights into the recruitment panel. The district council tells me that the overall standard of applicants was very high, and they're pleased to have found a range of different perspectives and skill sets to kick things off. And thanks to everyone who applied. Over the course of the year, the aim is to develop a work plan focusing on the 2030 vision and actions that deliver on community aspirations and needs. The council will be working with the board to broaden input and engagement through various means of outreach. And finally, we look forward to being able to brief you about plans as they evolve. So that's the new Community Engagement Board. And so just to add from me as well, for my sins, I have been appointed as one of the 10 that the group panel decided to appoint. Our first induction and team building session is on February the 3rd. And finally, one of the things I want to be able to do is to make sure that the interests and initiatives of local CANs are taken fully into account as the Community Engagement Board moves forward. So if you've got thoughts and views on what the Community Engagement Board should be doing, please do contact me and I'll try and feed stuff in as I receive it. Okay, so I'll just pause there, see if there are any questions on the report, news and updates that we've delivered to date. If not, we're nearly at the end of the meeting. I've got just a bit to report on future meetings. Another strong message from the survey findings was that folk would like an occasional face-to-face get-together for all local CANs. And I think that was a very strong message that came from the survey. So we're planning an event currently penciled in for 14th of May. where the focus would be on face-to-face workshops, partly on successful projects that groups have been running that they think it would be good for other groups to hear about that might be replicated in other areas, and also partly on new ideas and initiatives to try and build a bit of support and to get a wider input into how ideas or proposals might be developed. So the idea would be to generate as much opportunity for face-to-face discussion as possible. So please pencil the date in the diary. We're trying to pin down a venue at the moment, and the date that we've penciled in is the 14th of May. And obviously we'll send out further details as soon as we can. And we will be looking for groups to put themselves forward if they've got successful projects that they would like to talk about in workshops, or if they've got new ideas and initiatives that they want to share with other groups as well. So we will try and fit a further online forum session in before the face-to-face to get together. And the online forum session we're scheduling for the 21st of March. So that's another date for the diary. Okay, but that was a bit of a canter through. I think we're probably at the end of the meeting. Apologies for the technical glitches at the start where we couldn't enable you to share your videos with everybody else. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, especially Stuart, and your participation, particularly through the breakout sessions. Enjoy the rest of the evening and hopefully see you in March. Thanks very much and good night, everybody.